Well, welcome everyone to the State of Transit 2021, Reimagining Transit Post-COVID-19. Apologies, everyone. All right, so we know 2020 was a hard year for technology as well as for transit, but it also taught us several things. One of the lessons that I took away was that we need to support our essential workers, the folks who kept our society functioning. That includes transit workers because they kept others on the job. We need to respect them, pay them better, because those nurses, janitors, grocery clerks have been really essential all of this past year and beyond. Another lesson we learned this year is that things that we were told were impossible can totally be achieved. For a long time, we thought widespread working from home couldn't happen, that fare-free transit, that the near elimination of rush hour traffic, that major federal investment in bus operations, all of those things were impossible, right? Well, time to think about what else might be possible with sufficient commitment, time to think outside the box as we reimagine the future of transit in Metro Detroit. Those are a few of the topics we're going to discuss tonight. I'm Megan Owens. I'm the Executive Director of Transportation Riders United. And we have with us quite a great panel tonight. We are joined by Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter, who we will invite to make a few remarks in just a moment. We will also have Mikel Oglesby of the Detroit Department of Transportation, as well as Robert Cramer of SMART, the SMART bus service, will all provide comments. Let's take a quick look to share these poll results to get a glimpse of who we have here before we move on. Looks like Detroit and Oakland County are about tied with our participants here, as well as some Wayne County non-Detroit and a number of others. We had a lot of daily riders or occasional riders prior to COVID-19, but less so recently. A lot of people haven't been riding in recent months. So just fun to get a little glimpse of who we have here today. At this point, we have a very special guest. In between managing the second biggest county in the state and getting tens of thousands of people vaccinated, Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter made time to join us. Thanks for joining us, Dave. Would you like to say a few words to transit supporters here today? Although it might help if you...
Okay, yes. Unmute yourself. That is the phrase of 2020. Meg, thanks so much for allowing me to jump on your meeting. You know, I was here with you guys in person a year ago with my counterpart, Warren Evans from Wayne County, talking about how excited we were about the legislation that we had in Lansing that could modify the RTA, that could, using the Municipal Partnership Act, to get a ballot proposal on the ballot. Well, I got one more reminder last year of why transit is so difficult. And as many of you know, that legislation didn't pass, and we were very discouraged, but determined. And we were working on Plan B when COVID hit. And, you know, COVID has thrown a curveball for a lot of things, including transit. You know, we can't pretend otherwise. And I'm glad to hear, Megan, that you're taking on that issue head on. But I just want to say this. COVID does not end our efforts to improve transit. It can't. There's too many of us that have been too committed to this for too long. And, you know, I was encouraged that last November, even during the midst of COVID across the country, there were transit funding measures that were approved in a number of places around the country. Places as small as Alma, Michigan, and cities as big as Austin, Texas, and Seattle, Washington. So I'm not going to buy the argument that we can't advance transit during a pandemic. And as you said, Megan, transit has been a lifeline for our essential workers throughout this pandemic. And I think that even people who don't use transit have noticed and maybe have a greater appreciation for it as a result. So I'm not giving up. I don't think our region can give up. And that's the main thing that I want to tell you. And what does that look like? Well, maybe COVID has given us an opportunity to reevaluate some of those strategies, and that's kind of what we're doing. But I want you to know that our transit planner is still on board. We're still thinking through these questions, how it might look, how COVID may make it look a little differently, but how we can answer this question that we've all heard a million times, right? Why should I pay for a service that I don't use? That's been a stumbling block for a long time. But we've got to reframe that question. And that is, why should communities and counties that need transit be limited to just one simple basic level of service? And even though we get great service from SMART and DDOT, why should we be limited? So we've got to reframe that conversation. One size does not fit all. And so too often in Metro Detroit, all or nothing has meant nothing. And so I am committed to figuring out a way that we can offer a great base level of services through our providers for those folks who want it, and also offer an enhanced level of transit services for those communities who understand the value of it. So we're going to have to be more strategic. We're going to have to find new tools. We're going to have to do better education, frankly, and I think that's going to be a component of it. And that's where Transportation Riders United and others are going to be critical in helping to sell the case for transit. We don't have to sell this group, but there's still people out there that are going to have another way of looking at this question of why should I pay for it? And so I feel that I'm looking at COVID as a positive. We have this opportunity we got to get through COVID. There's no question about that. I'm not going to lie. My day job is almost all focused on vaccinations and getting businesses reopened and getting people back to work, but also beginning to rethink the plan that we put forward. And so that was frankly one of the disadvantages that we had last year when we were at the legislature, as everyone kept saying, well, what's the plan? And we said, well, we need a governance structure before there can be a plan. And so it was it was a chicken and an egg thing. We're gonna revisit this plan with Megan and TRU's support and counsel. But I got news for you. I won re-election in November. I got a 4-year term, and we will get a transit proposal before our voters sooner rather than later, because I haven't given up on that. So that's my main message to you tonight is don't be discouraged. Don't think COVID has eliminated our opportunity to address transit in this region, because I don't think that it has. And those other cities that I talked about are proof of that. And so just know I'll be back here again talking to you with more specifics, but I just wanted to stop in and let you know that I'm not discouraged. And because it's too important. Our region needs it, our residents need it, our employers and employees need it. And so I'm not giving up. And so I know you aren't either. And so let's hang in there and let's get this done.
Thank you so much, Dave. It means so much to so many of us to know that we have such a champion in the county. Have you had a chance to talk with the other county leaders? Or I know you've obviously been very busy with other issues. Have you had a chance to talk about what might be next?
Yeah, we've begun to have those conversations in broad terms. And again, COVID has really been a primary focus. And so, as I'm sure you'll hear from our friends at SMART and DDOT, maintaining the basic services that we have now has been a challenge. So, because remember, we're not part of any transit plan in Metro Detroit is going to be relying on the great service that SMART and DDOT provide. And so maintaining and increasing confidence in those services is going to be critical. So frankly, some of the conversation has just been, how do we make sure that our current services are effective? Because that's an important part of promoting anything else. But yes, honestly, we have begun to have conversations. I've shared with them exactly what I shared with you all tonight, which is I'm still committed to doing this. So don't get tired, don't give up. And we have when you talk to Warren Evans, when you talk to the mayor of Detroit, we have champions there. And so we're committed to this. This isn't just Dave Coulter or Oakland County speaking. We're committed to doing this. This might have to look a little different, but but maybe it'll look better. As you said, Megan, this virus has made us think outside the box in ways we're doing things better than we had thought about before. So I'm an optimist, and I'm also an advocate for transit. And so I believe that we can do this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Now, I know you've got a lot on your plate. I appreciate you fitting in some time to talk with us.
My pleasure.
And we will, this is the beginning, not the end of the conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you for everyone that is on this call, from Megan to the board and to everyone who is spending your Thursday night on a transit call. Thank you. It's your passion and your activity, your activism that has kept us alive for all of these decades, and we'll get it over the finish line. So just don't lose hope, folks. And thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. So I am thrilled we have such a big crowd tonight. As Dave said, we have a lot of people who really care about this. And after a little glitch, we've got an overflow crowd watching on Facebook Live as well. So please do use the chat for comments. Please do put questions in the Q&A. Please share your thoughts and experiences, everyone, on your social media channels. Just tag @Detroit Transit on just about any of the social media channels. I do want to mention that this event also serves as TRU's annual meeting, traditionally a time when we ask members to vote on our new members to our board of directors. We won't actually be voting on any new members today. We will have some openings later in the year. If that's something anyone is interested in exploring and learning more about, please do reach out and let us know. But I do also want to take a moment, there we go, to thank the amazing people who do serve on TRU's board, who continued to keep overseeing and supporting TRU despite long Zoom planning retreats and board meetings online and everything else, all the other craziness going on in their lives. And a special thank you to two of our board members who have spent 6 years serving TRU because they're passionate about transit, Shamsuddin Noman Sayed, as well as Paul Lippens, are stepping down. They've been great. And we also do make it a rule at these events to never turn anyone away because this information is so important. Usually at our annual meeting, there's no charge, but there's usually a team of smiling volunteers waiting at the door to greet you and to invite you to join TRU as a member or to make that donation, to renew as a member. Those smiling volunteers couldn't catch you on the way in, but your membership is still very much needed. So if you haven't recently donated to TRU, please take that moment, whether it's $5, $20, $500, please join today at detroittransit.org/donate. And before we jump into the agency updates, and I know you're excited for those, a lot of TRU's work is behind the scenes. And so this year more than ever, I want to take a few minutes to share a video that gives a sampling of what TRU has been up to this year. Almost a year into the COVID-19 pandemic, and it feels like everything has changed. We work in different places and in different ways now, like from my kitchen sometimes. We held Zoom Thanksgivings with our families. We grocery shop, participate in board meetings, watch movies, and manage virtual schooling, all from our living rooms. But one thing that hasn't changed, the need for reliable transportation. While many of us were able to work from home, many essential workers couldn't. The nurses, the janitors, the pharmacy techs, the grocery clerks, all those most essential workers who kept our society functioning, they depended on the bus to get where they needed to go. And those Detroit area buses remained absolutely vital throughout this pandemic for ensuring that essential workers could get where they need to go. And that's exactly why we at Transportation Riders United have been working for 20 years now to fight to defend and expand Detroit transit, because transit is essential. And while we certainly didn't expect to, True pivoted quickly when the March stay-at-home orders went into effect. Transit agencies made numerous changes very quickly in order to adapt to all the new information and expectations that were thrown on them, while still staying focused on keeping the transit rolling and keeping both drivers and riders safe. True helped those many essential workers who were still riding by compiling and sharing timely safety and service updates on our website and through social media. Fears were high. People were really afraid that buses could be huge super spreader events. So True delved into the research to find out. We learned that actually following a few safety procedures could make the bus relatively safe. So we shared that information everywhere we could. We put together a policy report, Safer Transit during COVID-19. We shared it online, in social media, through news media. And we hosted a Safer Transit during COVID-19 town hall in which our transit agency chiefs came together to update transit riders and to discuss their concerns.
I've been running into a lot of people that have been saying stuff like, how are you taking the bus during the pandemic? Do you have any concern that riders may drop due to the fear of taking public transit in the pandemic?
I'll take that one. So I think that there's definitely, in the short term, I think that is definitely a big role in the response, right? So you think about if people have another choice, there is some guidance out there that kind of discourages people from using transit because of the coronavirus.
Mr. Oglesby, what steps can be taken or will be taken to ensure that individuals that need to enter the front of the bus are not being discriminated against?
I'm glad that you brought that up. You know, I had heard some rumblings of something like that, so I'm glad that I'm hearing it directly from somebody. I need to look into it. Let me look into it and see if there's some type of alert that I can put out or something to stop it.
In addition to reacting to the COVID-19 changes, True continued the dedicated advocacy for transit funding and policy improvements that we're best known for. Back before COVID-19 struck, we were battling to change state legislation to enable regional transit funding to get back on the ballot. With county leaders as champions, we testified. We mobilized hundreds of supporters to speak out. Unfortunately, legislative leaders would not listen, and those efforts stalled. We also began the year partnering with the Turn Oakland County Green campaign to work with new Oakland County Executive Dave Coulter to develop ways that the county could be a leader in tackling the climate crisis, which means tackling the transportation challenges we face too. But when COVID struck, of course, our advocacy focus shifted, and it shifted nationally. We joined Transportation for America and transit supporters nationwide to demand that transit agencies be included in emergency funding bills that help keep our buses rolling. And we succeeded. After the election, we brought our focus back to the state legislature and hosted a pair of virtual transit roundtables. Bringing state legislators together with bus riders and other transit supporters was a great way to share the importance of transit and to explore how our legislators can best support our community's transit needs. That effort continues into this year as well. As much of the world did, True pivoted our education, our engagement, our advocacy work to online. And in a few ways, it actually offered greater opportunity for engagement. We brought dozens of people together again when we hosted 2 other virtual town halls, one on transit and climate change, one exploring who decides transit. And we continue to keep people up to speed on important transit issues. We launched a new web series that we call Tapping into Transit, along with some fun new transit trivia nights, because it can't be all work all the time.
In cities where we see really robust transit is actually one of the quickest and best ways around. And so if we can think about how do we design our communities That's going to happen at the local level. We need to improve the design of our communities in a way that integrates biking, that integrates walking, that integrates all these transit improvements, so that we can have people not thinking about it, but while they're not thinking about it, they're also not burning all those fossil fuels, polluting our air, making our communities less livable.
You know, why should people, bus riders in the D, vote yes on November 3rd?
You know, the picture on the screen right now tells a lot of the story. The Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund and the State Park Endowment Fund both are used for big projects like linear trails, like the DeQuinder Cut. Also, we want to see a greater proportion of amenities available to more people within a short drive.
So a number of the bigger improvements we know will take more funding to put into place. But what are some of the projects you have in that you're developing right now?
Sure. So one of the other planning efforts that we're just completing is a regional look at services for seniors and people with disabilities. So this was a collaborative effort between the RTA, the providers, and several other service providers in that work with people with disabilities and seniors to really identify the gaps in services for those specialized groups.
Well, not the year we planned for. I'm proud of our team's hard work this year to support transit riders and educate the community around COVID-19, to fight for the funding needed to keep the buses rolling, and to continue to advance the message of the value of transit despite many crises. All of this work is only possible thanks to the generous members of TRUE. It wasn't an easy year, but our financial supporters kept us rolling. To each of our members, I say thank you. Moving into 2021, we are excited to work with new federal leaders who value transit and will fight climate change and fight inequity. We'll work hard to ensure that our region benefits from this more transit-friendly agenda. It's no sure thing, but together with our legislative partners, county champions, ally groups, transit supporters around the region, we can not only defend and maintain the essential bus service that has kept our society rolling, but we can build even broader region-wide support for transit and fiercely advocate for the truly great transit that our region needs. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to achieve all this and more. By working together, we'll fight for a great regional transit system, one that gets everyone where they need to go. Let's get to work. Thank you for your patience with some of our technical difficulties there. Enough about us. I know you really want to hear from our transit agency leaders to tell you what they've been doing. And I will say, we do have a big crowd tonight, so we can't be as interactive as we generally try to be. So I will remind everyone to put questions into the Q&A. We even have, there's even a thumbs up function if there's a question someone else has put in that you really like. And please do use the chat function to share comments and ideas, as well as to address any problems like letting me know if there's no sound. So thank you for that. And then of course, share your takeaways on social media. Our next speaker is, we're going to have Robert Cramer up next. He's the Deputy General Manager of SMART, our suburban bus operator, and for some, for some 2 million people live near one of SMART's 47 different bus routes. And Robert is the one overseeing and coordinating all of that during an unprecedented pandemic, nonetheless. Robert's here to share a few highlights of how they've managed to keep the service rolling through the pandemic, how they've stretched very limited funding to provide as much service as possible. Robert, I will stop my share and pass it to you. Do you have a screen share option? Great.
The green filter when you transition is pretty striking, I have to admit. Anyway, no, it's good now. Okay, so Like Megan mentioned, I'm the deputy GM at Smart. We're the suburban bus system. The S is right in our name. Obviously, I'll go back to the title. So this is about kind of how we responded, kept people rolling on the road, and what we see moving forward. I think if I take a page from Dave Coulter's book, I think that there's a lot of opportunities that are coming out of this, and the fact that we have received the CARES Act funding and now a second round of CARES Act funding is on the way certainly has allowed us, and I think you'll hear the same from DDOT, to be able to continue focusing on the important mission of connecting people where they need to go for jobs and other trips, and not having to worry too much about one foot being kind of off the cliff with some of the funding stuff. So that has really been helpful, especially for SMART, that we can feel confident making the right choices during the pandemic and also moving forward, because we do have a little bit of support there to help us carry through this time of increased expenses and certainly decreased revenue. So just a little bit about kind of what happened or our initial response, and I'll talk a little bit here on the next slide about how the ridership reflects this too. But there was so much unknown. I mean, Smart lived through the same couple of weeks, well, a couple of months at the beginning that everyone else did, where the sky is falling to a certain degree, and there's not a lot known about what actually works and doesn't work and what's going to happen. So all of the choices that we made were focused on kind of balancing the safety and health of our staff, in particular our drivers and maintenance staff, well, all of our staff really, balancing that with what we always focused on was the critical need to make sure that we have some level of reliable service out there for the people that did still need to get to work during the stay-at-home order, right? So talking about grocery store workers, health system workers, just like basic essential services stuff. It's just so important. There are some other providers outside of this region that had to make that difficult decision to suspend fixed route services, for example. And I know Mikel's on the same page as me with this as well. There's just too much. There's too many important trips out there, no matter how restrictive the orders are, for us to just say, you know what, it's easier to close up shop and just wait for this to blow over. That's just not part of the essential service that we are. So the precautions we took were kind of over and above. So Megan touched on this a little bit, and this is like, it's kind of fun for me to reflect every now and then. If you would have told me a year ago that some of the things that we're doing and being evaluated on are what they are, of course, people would say that's just, it's a death sentence for the system, for my job, whatever it might be. The idea that you're, volunteering to turn off fares and stop collecting them as a way to protect your drivers, that's nuts. But it's something that we had to do, and working with our drivers. And it was kind of like, this is what's really given us the most fear, is people coming and having to interact with us. And so we said, you know what, we'll put up a chain. Everyone comes in the back door, and away we went. And the other thing similar is, think about like too much ridership is a bad thing. Like, who would have thought that would be the case, right? But it is the reality here, that if you're not balancing that, that now you're part of the problem rather than part of the solution. So it's just, you got to try to make some silver lining out of it. But just to think about how things have flipped upside down is kind of crazy. Now, we really wanted to focus on transparency and communication. This was something we were kind of internally trying to improve before this anyway, but this really threw us in the fire, because you have people that are, everyone, the drivers are staying home, and we're cutting service to 30% of our regular level. There's a lot of drivers that are kind of basically on the sidelines ready to pitch in, but how do you update them with that information? How do you make sure that they understand what we're doing so that they can be less fearful of what might be out there and how we're going to handle it? So we started doing a webinar series for all of our staff internally, different webinars, different times a day. We've done this week was our 34th week of webinars to cover the staff. And it's just those things that sometimes it's easy to get used to, like, oh, I don't know if we should tell people this or that, and how do we handle the messaging? Everything can be thrown out the window, and this is an easy decision. The more information you can provide is better, and that's really a good way to do business anyway. So again, it's trying to find some silver lining out there, and then along the way, trying to keep up with the orders and the rules and the recommendation. Our HR department was like still right on the front edge of tracking the quarantines. We've got the whole chart. You guys have probably seen it, other presentations of all of our staff and how they were affected, and there's just so much that went into that. Certainly the smart staff really answered the call to keep up with that and continue to do it. So here's a graphical way for Fixdrout to kind of show what I just talked about to a certain degree. You can see beginning of March last year, which we're closing in on, we're getting close to a year from there. We were running, you probably heard us last year, all of the good news about FAST is doing great and our systems continuing to grow. We were still on track to have that third year of FAST be just as successful as the first and the second as far as continuing to add ridership. And then just, within about 10 days, the bottom was totally pulled out on the ridership. And this is before the stay-at-home order or anything on our end. This was just society reacting to the reality of what was going on in the world. So we went from 10% over to basically 80% under our expected ridership in about 10 days. And you can see the blue line on here is kind of us adjusting our service. So we dropped down to, to 70% quickly, and then we went down to 30% after just about 3 or 4 weeks, because we wanted to make sure that the service we promised at that 30% level, that we could put it out on the road and not have to worry about pressuring drivers. Well, yeah, we got to try to get more people out there, and having anyone have to be uncomfortable with going out, anyone have to worry, well, should I actually report my symptoms? We wanted to get all of that out of there and have the people that did still have to go out, which was a really tough thing for people to do then, to feel comfortable that we would be there when we said we would to get them. Even though the frequencies were a lot lower, at least they could still count on us. Because we didn't know if it was an outbreak with drivers or mechanics, we might not be able to provide more service. All those things were going into the decision, erring on the side of safety. And so you can see as time went on, we have stepped service back up. Now we're a little bit over 70%, because we were able to, through precautions and all of the great work and actions of our staff, to keep those, the COVID exposure and outbreaks and stuff really never were an issue. We had some people that had positives, but they were always quarantined and isolated. And so we never had the issue where we were worried about being able to get service on the road. This is the graph I was talking about. This was my favorite thing to do every month, was to work with our planning department to get the numbers to make the next layer of growth on top of this Woodward fast route. And you can see how things works here on the left. We had another layer going on top, and yeah, it's not growing on top anymore. Hopefully someday we'll get back there. But this is kind of, again, how stark this was just from one month to the next of a quick impact. So some of the precautions we have in place, and this is for staff and riders at the same time. So we're doing cleaning, microbacterial spray of our terminals and our buses. We're doing extra on-road cleanings of the vehicles. We have temperature screening kiosks and daily health screening for our staff. And the health screenings we also apply for our paratransit and connector ridership as well before they can reserve a trip. We've got PPE available for the staff, and also, in addition to requiring it for the riders, we have some extras there so that if they're, if that can be the barrier to having someone ride, to give them a mask, then we are able to do that. We have what we call maximum remote work, which again, the state has kind of gone up and down on what they feel about it. Right now, they're really pushing that, any business needs to be able to prove why anyone has to work in the office. And we've basically kept that as our approach throughout the pandemic. We've got over 100 people that are working some or all of the time at home, including we've fully remoted all of our customer information folks, our small bus scheduling, and our central and small bus dispatching. They're all able to work completely 100% at home with all the tools that they need, which, in addition to making sure that we don't have issues with COVID spreading, it also provides more flexibility because they have those opportunities at home. If we want to keep customer service open or add a staffer in a quiet time when we're making a service change, it's easy to do that because they can just turn the equipment on at their house and get paid for it rather than having to worry about the scheduling in person and the capabilities there. So again, another kind of silver lining. We've got hazard pay still in place for our frontline workers as a way to make sure we can keep people on the road and acknowledge the difficulties and challenges they have and keep our staffing up at a good level. We're always behind our budgeted numbers, and this is no exception. So we want to make sure we can keep the drivers we have on the road now and as we start to ramp back up further. Really, we've just been trying to be very understanding of the leave flexibility for staff to take. So for example, the feds require 80 hours of emergency paid leave for quarantining. We gave the 80 hours and basically added SMART's emergency leave unlimited after that, because I never want somebody to have to choose between accurately reporting something that leads them to quarantine and wondering whether or not they're going to have to use up their vacation time or get a check. And so really just trying to be as flexible as we can, understand that there's lots of people that work for us who have kids that have schools impacted or relatives that need to be cared for. So I think really, again, communication and transparency has done well for us so far, and it's something we're planning to continue into the future. This is actually the playbook we created. This is something that the state was really encouraging agencies to do, maybe even requiring. And we put together, it's basically kind of our playbook. It's a public document, talks about all of the precautions and measures we take internally and on the buses as far as masks, room capacities, different PPE procedures. And this was intended to be something so that our staff is on the same page. Everyone knows what they're supposed to do to make sure we can stay safe. But also, again, the public can understand that we're taking this seriously and see that we have a plan as well. So this is something that is always updated, but available on our web. Okay, so rolling on, I'm sure Mikel will talk about this as well, but turning the fares back on when they're safe, kind of stop the bleeding a little bit to a certain extent. Lower ridership means it's not like we're just going to get all of the revenue back, but something's better than nothing. Also at SMART, we've used some of our CARES Act funding to get there's 23 buses we were going to replace. We were able to use CARES to supersize those to 60-foot articulated buses. Those are going to start rolling in March 1st. We're outfitting all of our buses with permanent driver barriers, the exact same model that DDOT has almost finished putting on their buses, and outfitting every bus with one of the two wheelchair positions to be the quantum automated wheelchair restraint, again, to make it long-term more independence for those who are using the system with a mobility assistant device, but also for the drivers in the shorter term. That's an opportunity where they have to come in close contact to help secure the passenger. In this case, for the most part, that will be eliminated because the passenger is able to do it with the driver staying in their seat. Also, the microtransit pilot areas, we're working really hard. Our board approved those in December. We're working hard to get that up and running by mid-March. We've got the Mobility Hubs Park and Ride Plus project that's really more critical than ever as we see what's moving forward. Those are going to be incredible assets for the communities that those are in, for the system, for the region, and more so than just park and ride. It's going to provide an opportunity for all sorts of interaction between different types and modes of mobility, bikes, walking, transit, ride sharing, van pooling, whatever it might be. We want these sites to really be a hub for all things mobility. And I already mentioned about the CARES Act. Last thing I want to just touch on, some of the things that are priority and moving into the future here. We're finalizing the Smart Vaccine Transportation Plan. We're going to be rolling it out soon as a way to get free rides to anybody who needs them to get to vaccines around our service area. There'll be more details coming on out about that. It'll be a mix of all different types of all of our different modes: fixed route, connector, community partner programs, and microtransit. Be working together to get people connected to those as hopefully they start becoming widely available. And then also kind of from a bigger picture perspective, the mantra at SMART is it's not a matter of when we turn our services back on, but how we turn them back on. How are our patterns going to be different? If you think about all the services we have focused on getting people 9-to-5 workers downtown or 9-to-5 workers in other office nodes, there's going to be a need for us to de-emphasize those moving forward because the ridership just isn't going to be there, and it's going to be increasing in other areas. If you think about logistics, hospitality, restaurants, retail, those are things that need good transportation 7 days a week and not just in certain periods of the day. And so that'll be part of our focus is microtransit can expand the good fixed routes, but also kind of rebalancing a bit as we turn things back on to think about how the patterns and needs are going to be changing as they move forward. And then, of course, I'm going to close with kind of a segue into Mikel, who I think is maybe a couple agenda items in the future. But I really publicly, again, I'm thanking you, Mikel, for your partnership. We've had a great level of coordination between the staff at DDOT and SMART, and that has only grown since Mikel has come on board, and it's going to get stronger as we move forward, and really will allow both of us, both of our agencies, to be able to do bigger and better things in the future. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Megan.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So much exciting stuff going on there. We're going to come to Mikel in just a minute, but first we are going to share a few voices from some riders. We want to make sure we share a variety of experiences that have been so we had a couple folks from our team, Andre and Bianca, went out and interviewed a number of riders to see what their experience has been.
If you could say something to DDOT, what would you say?
Please get it together. Please get it together. Get it tight, get it right.
Hi, I'm Bianca with True. We are here at the State Fairgrounds talking to bus riders about the state of transit. Bus riders have been saying that their experiences have been good so far during these times of the pandemic, with bus riders getting to where they need to go.
The DDOT can just keep doing what they're doing because I have no problems out of the DDOT Plus service, and I've been taking it for over 10 years.
However, we have been hearing some not so good things regarding like bus riders maybe passing up, being passed up by bus drivers. Bus drivers may have some issues with bus riders who have not been wearing masks.
How was your bus ride, Ben?
So-so.
Yeah.
So-so. And they be passing you up about 3 times before you get on the bus.
What would you like to see for Detroit Transit?
Better time and more safety protocols.
Overall, bus rides have been good, have been timely, and we just want bus drivers to do better in some cases, and maybe even bus riders to cooperate more with the mask mandate.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Me too.
Well, I'm sorry the sound on that wasn't quite as good as we hoped, but we did want to share a few different voices, and those will certainly be available on YouTube and on Facebook shortly following this. And next, we want to pass it to Detroit's Executive Director of Transit, Mikel Oglesby, who's had the dubious honor of taking that job just this past spring. He's responsible not only for DDOT, but oversees the People Mover, the Q Line, and any potential transit expansions, although he's mostly been struggling to keep the buses rolling through this unprecedented pandemic. And in case it wasn't tough enough, I've asked him to summarize all the challenges and progress of the past year and share what's next, all in under about 10 minutes. So think you're up to it, Mikel? Unmute first. There
Quite
you go.
possibly. I'm not the most technically savvy person here, but I think I got it. You ready? Can you see that? Yes? Robert?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, great.
we can.
And you can hear me, right? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And Robert, thank you for the kind words. We have been working very tough during this pandemic simply because we have to do this together in Detroit and everywhere else. I mean, this has been exciting and tough. I've been here about 9 months and there's a lot that's going on. So let's just kick it off. So we're moving through a crisis through this pandemic. This has been a challenge as we move forward. I'm going to touch on just a few quick slides for those who are not familiar with DDOT and the layout. We have 788 employees, 462 operators, $160 million budget with 288 buses. But in short, we have 45 fixed route with 12 24-hour routes. We have some pretty big capital projects and grants. The Coolidge facility is coming. It looks like we'll be around, I'd say, 3 years or so. What that's going to do, it's going to be our major location, and we're going to shut down 2 of our garages. We're going through our mid-life overhaul. It's underway with our 2014 fleet. We received $64 million in CARES Act funding, and we have more money coming, from what I understand, in 2021 with the CRISA Act, which will be announced later. So that's great, just in case we have to fill the gap moving forward. But I just want to say this, even during non-pandemic times, transportations face challenges, including safety, funding, and accessibility. Just think about this. Before the pandemic, our goal and our job, as Robert mentioned, was to get as many people in a bus as possible. Could you imagine us being faced with trying to run transportation with less people? It doesn't make sense, but we had to do it. Now think about pre-pandemic having crowded buses and then knocking it down to 10 people per bus. Well, before COVID even hit, we would have had problems with providing transportation. So that sort of puts it in perspective as to where we are today. A little bit of our fixed route fleet size. Like I said, 288 vehicles. Our on-time performance is roughly 76% year to year. And our annual ridership here shows that there was only a minor dip, but that's simply because only a few of the months when the pandemic hit is reflected. Similar to some of the other slides, you'll see DDOT's perspective. I actually put it together by month, so you could take a look at this. In 2020 ridership, in January, we were at about 1.9 million riders. Imagine all of a sudden in April, look at that drop down to 380,000. I mean, that was just devastating. You'll notice that the numbers started climbing back up because we learned more about the pandemic. We adjusted schedules, we learned on the fly, and we're running about 45% of our service right now. But we're still having a tough time. Again, look at this year-to-year comparison. In 2019, we were way up there. And then once the stay-at-home order kicked in, there's the dip in April again, and it reflects the 2020 numbers. The previous 2019, we were roughly at about 1.9 to 2 million riders a month, and we dropped all the way down to between 600,000 and 800,000 at our best. So that really sort of puts it in perspective. We have large ridership, and we still had a lot of riders during the pandemic, so we were doing the best that we can. I wanted to put paratransit up just to simply say that we're going to be working on improving our paratransit. It needs a lot of work. These statistics are nice, but I anticipate them to be better because over the next year, we're going to be focusing on the paratransit side of the house and bringing things to the next level. And I anticipate within a year, you'll see a drastic change. Now, challenges through 2020. The pandemic required a complete rethinking of the way we operate, from social distancing to stay-at-home orders. The challenges were unbelievable. So what were some of the challenges in 2020? You heard some of them, but COVID, the fear of the unknown. As a matter of fact, I remember when COVID first was announced, or the pandemic first started, I was told, be careful of answering your mail. You know, don't touch it. Remember, we had no idea what COVID was all about. And in time, we learned. So we suspended the fares during the pandemic, which created budget constraints due to lack of revenue. It elevated job stress from our operators providing transportation with these limitations, also limited driver availability. They even had some illness and self-quarantining themselves. Overcrowding of the buses are tough, and the increase of joyriding while reducing the amount of people that can be on the bus is very challenging, and still is today. Social distancing in our vehicles and discontinued hazard pay for us. We were providing hazard pay to a certain amount of money, but once that money ran out, we are moving forward providing transportation without that. So what did we do? 9 keys to success is what we did. We've already provided over 2 million masks to the riders. We increased the frequency of cleaning and sanitizing. We limited the capacity to riders per bus. Again, 10 on a 40-foot and 15 on a 60. We enacted distancing from the driver, installed 248 state-of-the-art barriers to date, and counting as we speak. We're getting closer and closer to the 288. We analyzed ridership patterns and adjusted routes accordingly and increased service alerts for route adjustments. We established a really good internal tracking system to be able to tell where overcrowding was taking place. We increased police presence, which deployed police. And we basically deployed them mostly to DDOT because we weren't servicing the people mover or queue line. And we increased digital communication. So those 9 keys to success kept us going. Now, just to talk a little bit about some accomplishments during these trying times, we were able to install 41 out of 59 ad shelters. They were installed, and we intend on installing the rest of them by 2020. But we did have a bit of the setback with the pandemic, and there are new bus signs on the way. We're really excited about getting past this and getting to the new normal so we can show you what we can do. The Office on Mobility and Innovation is going to be a big part of the partnership with DDOT. We're bringing it to the next level. We're going to take the e-scooter partnerships, the bike options, livable communities, walkable communities. We're going to try to incorporate everything, including microtransit. We actually already did a microtransit program. It's very successful, and we're taking it to the next level for first and last mile. And as you can tell, you've heard about that from Robert. That goes to show you that we are talking on a regular basis. Technology, you name it, we're putting it on. Completed the installation of hardware and software on our entire fleet, a full conversion of a new dispatch location system, implemented new daily operational and payroll software, implemented a new system for customer service, and we installed new LCD and LEDs at Rosa Parks. We're working hard. While we are not up and running in full speed, these are the things we're currently working on right now. When everybody is in the bus, like we're used to, they're going to see all of these improvements. So we're working hard, and you will see when the new normal hits, we'll be ready for you. So moving forward, I wanted to put this here. DDOT strives to be the system of choice for Detroiters and visitors to the region. Sorry, Robert, I had to put it there. I wanted to put DDOT strives to be the smartest choice, but I knew you'd get me later. So again, I tease, but we both work very well together. Safety as a culture is being implemented throughout the DDOT based on the pandemic. We increased police visibility, and I'm going for an additional 10 police in the next budget to work together with DPD, and I'm replacing all the cameras with up-to-date technology. I rescoped, sat down with staff, and we rescoped road supervisor responsibilities to be pandemic sensitive. People are out there, they're frustrated, they're waiting for the next bus, they don't understand what's going on. We need more road supervisors, they're working hard. I understand what we have out isn't enough, but we're doing what we can with what we have. We've given access to PPEs for all employees and protective barriers, and we provided de-escalation training. As it was mentioned, we have to resume fares eventually, but we're not going to do it until it's clean and safe. So we intend on doing this hopefully in March. We'll provide hand sanitizing stations. This will reduce the joyriders and overcrowding, and will provide transportation to those who need it to get to the dialysis or to get to their jobs or anything that they need to do. And we're also exploring a cashless option for fare collection. That takes some time. We're working hard, and we're working in conjunction with SMART. Again, we're going to start collecting fares together, and we're going to start cashless fare collection together when we figure out the solution. A lot of people have heard state fare and the state fare plan. A lot of people have various opinions. My opinion is what comes out of it is a state-of-the-art transit center. Right now in that area, it's a transit hub with shelters. We will have a full-blown transit center, not only for the riders, but for the operators to really move us to a first-class system. The DBA, the Detroit Building Authority, will be moving forward in building that, and we'll be putting our input in, and it's expected that this will be complete in 2020. You have to realize something like this, if I were to go and try to get funding for it, to get to the point that we're at now, it would take at least 5 years. So this opportunity was one that we had to jump on. We're going to electrify Detroit. I almost said it's electric, but we received funding in conjunction with SMART to get 2 vehicles, and we actually expanded it to 4 vehicles. And we're going to work on the Detroit green footprint. We're going to try these buses out and see how they perform in the snow and see how they perform in the heat. And if this is the wave of the future, we want to be ready. So our target delivery is the end of 2021, and the service will begin in early 2022. So stay tuned for that. Frontline employees and back to basics, that's what I'm about. That's my thing. I want to make sure that our frontline employees are appreciated. So I've worked with partnerships with the Detroit Tigers, the Detroit Red Wings, and we have been letting our operators know we care. You are the reason why people are getting to where they need to be. We need to provide you with the tools to do your job, and we're going to do just that. Respect. I talk to the operators. I've sat with almost all of them, and I listen to what they have to say, and I take their ideas and I incorporate it into what we do on a daily basis. That's how we moved forward with the de-escalation training and other education, and also train the trainer. We let people know how to behave on a vehicle. We had a code of rights that we put out. And as we move forward with collecting fares, we're going to do something simpler, again, working with SMART. And we're both going to let people know what to do, what is really going on, and how to behave on a vehicle. And last but not least, again, the front line, I love them. So I just have to show off my operators. They're the best. We created 3 steps of protection because just the barriers alone are not enough to protect not only the operators, but the riders. But as far as the operators go, we came up with 3 steps of protection. 1, we provided masks. We did that early on because that was what was available. Next, we moved forward with the state-of-the-art barrier that we're installing right now. They're called Vapor V Shields. They're the best on the market. And then last, the vaccine. We started providing the vaccine and giving the operators an opportunity to take the vaccine over 3 weeks ago. And I showed them. They said, we're not going to take the vaccine unless you do. So you know what I did? I took the vaccine, and other operators followed, and we're in this together. And with that, that concludes my presentation.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that was some great information from both. Let's see if we can. There we go. So we've got lots of questions and not necessarily a huge amount of time because we've had so much information, but I'm going to jump right in to some of the questions that we have. As a quick reminder, please do use the question and answer. We've got some great questions in there. If someone else has already asked your questions, please give it a thumbs up. So we will start. One of the questions says, I know a lot of folks are optimistic about federal funding for transit under the Biden administration. Should Metro Detroit end up receiving a significant amount of federal funding to invest in public transit, what should be prioritized with that funding? What would you say for each of you that are your top priorities for new funding, whether that's, there was also a question about capital, any goals for potential capital projects. So what are your top goals? What do you think you could do with additional resources? Robert, want to start?
Sure. This feels like it should be an easy recitation of a wish list, but I have questions. I can't just answer it, right? The difficult part, and this goes for the CARES and the CRISA Act funding also, is you can't really make, you can't make investments in service with one-time money. So I think it's really important to realize that it's important to think about, that's what I talked about, some of the capital things that we're doing with the CARES Act money that are really helpful during the pandemic and then are helpful moving forward as well. So I think to me, if it's one-time money, I think working towards some of the stuff that I know DDOT's working on as well, maybe looking at picking some corridors and starting to pilot and work toward more off-board payment, more infrastructure improvements on those heaviest routes to really it obviously increases the capacity, but also makes it more of the world-class system that I think both of us are striving to have. If it is some sort of long-term funding, then obviously that changes the dynamic a bit as far as adding extra service and routes. But in the meantime, I think that's kind of the focus is how do you use those dollars to really make what we have that much better in a sustainable way.
Mikel, your thoughts?
Ditto. Next. No, I'm kidding. Robert said it best. You're talking about it. There's really color of funds and one-time funding versus not, right? So if I had an opportunity with one-time funding, I mean, I'd really go full bore on the cashless system. I need to do something about our fare boxes themselves. Believe it or not, we have the oldest fare boxes I've ever seen. I mean, these are the oldest GFIs, and I'm realizing, wow, in order for us to move to the next level, we've got to do something about this. But if I had a wish list of money that I could put into anything, unfortunately, CARES Act funding, there are only certain things you can do. But if I had my dream, my first dream would be to figure out how to provide additional money to my operators to help with retention. That would be the first thing. My next thing would be, how can I give them a little bit more money for hazard pay, right? So it's like a lot of people don't realize the CARES Act funding, the way that it's set up, you just can't take it and plop it in hazard pay and you can't do all these things. But yes, if I had kind of my wish list, those would probably be my bigger ones as far as where I'm at there. And then of course, investing in more vehicles. Investing in more green vehicles because I'm part of a green coalition and now people are kind of looking at electric. I think even the automobile industry is starting to look at it. So I think we need to kind of get on board with that and do our part. But I think between that and some of the things Robert talked about, I think that would be key.
Another question builds off that well. Callie asked or mentioned that one of the biggest problems with Transit America, and especially Metro Detroit, is the lack of money for ongoing operations. How can the region run buses more frequently, run later into the day? Tom added to that, frequency, service times are the biggest issues that he sees. How does this figure into funding priorities? You certainly noted that you can't use one-time money for ongoing operations. So how do you tackle this challenge?
I'll go first again, because I'm going to double down on some of Mikel's comments there. This was something that came up even from my perspective when the RTA was talking about different plans to add a bunch of tens of millions of dollars to DDOT and SMART's services as part of their plan. I don't know that I could find and pay drivers to support a lot more service. And I think really money is part of it. The hazard pay certainly in the short term is part of it as well. But I think there needs to be more investment, which is something that's high on SMART's priority list, is developing some more significant training programs, looking at different ways to retain. Are there ways that we're scheduling or structuring the service that would lend themselves to be changed a little bit to attract different pools of drivers and workers? That's a big challenge to say, well, yeah, if you give me ongoing money, I'll increase the service. You got to be able to have the drivers the drivers that will work for you and that will stay working for you, that are good with customer service and safety. That is a bigger challenge than it might seem once you get past the funding.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to take into consideration too, if the pandemic wasn't taking place, we'd be having the same conversation. Right. And I really wish the pandemic wasn't part of the issue. A lot of the questions are sort of in the mind of, okay, once we get past this, what are you going to do? It's like, let's get past this. That's what we need to do. We need to get past this, but we are thinking forward. I've talked to Robert about this too. I mean, these are the things that keep us up at night because we're focusing so much. I know I'm focusing so much on making sure that we're providing the service that we can with the resources that we have. And it's not enough because we are actually thrown a monkey wrench, if you will, with the 10 people per vehicle. I will tell you one thing though that I didn't mention. Once we start boarding from the front, we can increase that 10 to 18 to 20. Well, wait a minute now, you have a different ball game now, because now if you have people who are paying and you don't have joyriders, people who need the transportation are now able to get on, and you have the select people to ride. The only overcrowding that'll take place are the people sitting at the bus stop that don't really need the transportation. So we need to turn this frown upside down, if you will, and make sure that we get to that point. And that's one opportunity. We then have to take a look at that, analyze it, see how it's working, and then make some tweaks. Remember, again, I've been doing this 30 years. My job's to put butts in seats. That's what I do. I come out here and you say, welcome to Detroit. You can only let 10 people on a bus. What? So it's really just a difficult time right now, and we're learning as we go. But I think once the pandemic starts to kind of go down and everybody takes the vaccine, I'm going to convince Robert to go. We'll then be able to see a major change. So that's really where I think the curve's going to take place.
Excellent. Yeah, definitely no question, there's a lot of challenges, and funds, money helps some of them, but certainly doesn't solve everything. Another related to that, unfortunately, we're running short on time, so I think maybe two more here. As the governor pursues additional funding for fixing the roads, do you have any thoughts on how to make sure transit is included in that? How to make sure that we're fixing the overall transportation system in the state, not just paving roads?
Robert,
yeah, okay, I can go first again. Yeah, sure, no problem. So Smart we just rejoined MPTA for the first time. We hadn't been,
which is the Michigan Public Transit Association.
Yes.
For anyone who's not familiar.
Thank you. Appreciate the conversion there. For whatever reason, we weren't part of it for a long time. And depending on how you count the size, we're either the first or the second biggest agency in the state. And for us not to be at the table, again, it's kind of silly. So we're back at the table. DDOT's there as well. And I think that's really the best vehicle, because it allows us to kind of pool the resources of all the transit providers around our similar challenges. Not everyone has the same challenges. In some cases, between Smart and DDOT, we might even have conflicting priorities on some levels. But overall, there's some things that are really easy for us to all push on. And so I think that is the avenue we've been taking. They were instrumental and helpful in making sure that transportation workers were included in phase 1B for the vaccines, for example, pushing to make sure that the governor is adding at least a little bit more reference to the importance of public transportation as an essential worker and an essential service kind of earlier in the pandemic. So I really think the power of many is important for that push, and that's where we're continuing to focus our effort.
Absolutely. Robert said it best. As a matter of fact, I too was at that meeting, and we both were kind of talking beforehand about we need to get involved. When I was in California, I was on the CTA. When I was in Florida, I was on the FPTA. And then I looked at the list of who were I'm part of, and I was like, where's Michigan? Where is it? So we attended, we listened, and we realized that's the avenue, and that's where we need to make that push. That if there is an opportunity to say, listen, maybe roads aren't the thing. Maybe we need to start getting a piece of this pie to public transportation. We are going to be there to speak, not only for the riders, but just for people in general that want to see transportation do better. So I guarantee you that you have two people that are representing transit.
Excellent. And while there's a lot more questions, I know we are running short on time. A couple of people asked about fares. Renard stated, why is there a push to collect fares so soon when there's federal aid coming with so many people out of work who can barely afford their housing? Will federal funds allow for the continued fare suspension? Or how are you balancing those needs?
Let me start with that one. One of the things that I realized as I started looking at the budget, looking at the funding, is that the city was running pretty low on the amount of funds that are available for public transportation. As a matter of fact, when I realized that things like casino funding was a major portion of the funds that we get, and all of a sudden the casinos are shut down, and I get this bad news that, oh, by the way, you're going to be short $20 million. I mean, we have to make sure that when we get this funding, we hold it. It's almost like for a rainy day, if we can. Obviously, I couldn't because we utilized a lot of it, and we still have chiseled down a majority of the funding to this point. But we're going to have to start generating some type of funding to be able to sustain transportation. I understand no good deed goes unpunished. Once you start doing something, it just continues. We're hoping that the pandemic and the issues with the pandemic and the numbers start going down. And as they start going down, people understand that we have to collect fares. That's one. Two, collecting fares does something else. It stops overcrowding for joyriders. You have to provide transportation to anyone who wants transportation. So we have had situations where a bus of 10 people who are joyriding pull up, and I have someone that needs to go to the hospital and they can't get on the bus because it's only 10 and you have to wait for the next one. And then that just keeps bicycling throughout the entire system. Some people say, well, just throw more buses out there. Well, that's like whack-a-mole, right? How do you know every single location that you're going to do that? And that, from a statistical standpoint, we're trying to do it, but those are some of the challenges and some of the reasons from our standpoint why we believe, starting to collect fares cleanly and safely is the right way to go.
Yeah, and just to add on that a little bit, everything Mikel's saying it's the same experience and priorities for SMART. We've had, this is another backwards, wouldn't have thought before. We've had a number of riders, in addition to our drivers, asking us, when are we going to turn fares back on, asking us to turn them back on for exactly this reason. Our drivers are out there, and bus driving, it's the toughest job that we have at SMART. They are out there on their own. They are our forward facing experience with the public. They're getting people around. They're stuck in traffic. They've got people who are irritated and angry and scared, all riding around on their bus. It's difficult. But if you hear the drivers, and this was the same thing with the masks as well, they're passionate. They understand how much people count on these services to get to work. And they want to be able to take people where they need to go. And when they know, hey, I got these people who are getting on and they're riding back and forth on a long route like Gratiot or Woodward, they're taking seats away from people who would be able to otherwise be on the bus. And so they're pulling up, and they aren't going anywhere. They'll ride a couple times, they get off, they get back on again. And like Mikel said, I'm not saying we're going to ban somebody because it's public transportation. That's the definition of public transportation. But especially when there's so much pressure on making sure we can keep people distanced apart and safe and get people to these essential jobs to keep all of us healthy and keep the grocery shelves stocked. It is a big deal. And this is the best way for us to address that effectively.
And I know we're running out of time, but just one more thing I just thought about. We have a little bit of an advantage because we have our own police, and a majority of our police calls are confrontations about first, masks and not pulling them up above there and not wanting to wear them and all the silliness that comes with that. But more importantly, just the joyriding part. It's darned if you do, darned if you don't. If I have a transit police officer pull somebody off the bus because they're riding too much and they videotape it, it will go viral. And all of a sudden, we all know, I've seen my viral videos, okay? It'll go viral. And then the next thing you know, I'll get a call saying, what are you doing to the riding public? So we're kind of torn here. And my operators, I'll be honest with you, they're frightened in some situations, and I need to do what I need to do to protect them also, and the riders, but them too.
Well, I sure hope they're able to get more drivers, get more buses out there when you are able. I know it doesn't solve everything, but the more service that's available, the less crowding there is. Now, I know, Mikel, you host a monthly customer comment meeting. Is that the best way for people who have further questions or concerns to reach you? We've got a lot more questions that we can't get to tonight.
Right, absolutely. Just keep an eye on our website, our DDOT website, and we have all of the community meetings, and I'm at every single one of them.
Great. Those are what, like, I think the third Thursdays.
It's a third Thursday,
Okay.
and as a matter of fact, we're probably going to have some more because, as you know, especially as we get towards collecting fares, there are going to be a lot of questions, and I'm right there to answer them. I'm not a type of person that sits in the office and you don't see me. You see me. The operators see me. I am out there. So, and I'll answer every question you have. You may not like it, but I'll answer it.
Excellent.
And
Thank you so much.
I think that's the most important thing.
Thank you so much for that. Robert, what's the best way for people to get comments or questions or concerns to you?
They should go talk to Mikel. He's got his meetings third Thursday of every month. And he goes to all of them, so he can just let me know.
There you go.
Yep.
I also, yeah, you guys have the smart board meetings with public comment, and I know you guys both have customer service numbers. Let's see, 313-933-1300 to reach out to DDOT if you have any questions. 866-962-5515 if you want to reach out to SMART with comments or concerns. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Now, we are going to switch gears, but we are not done. These two are able or can step off if needed, but we are going to switch gears because, as I shared at the opening, we've been told for far too long that Detroit, that it's not possible for us to have a truly wonderful transit system, that either the auto industry won't let us, or we're too sprawled, or it's too late. But if all of these things that we've experienced during COVID, if a third of workers can start working from home, if we can eliminate rush hour almost overnight, what else is really possible? When we asked folks on Twitter the future of Detroit Transit, responses included faster and more frequent service, new bus routes to more places, new mobility options that connect people where they need to go. I invite everyone to share your thoughts on the chat. And our next speaker is tackling this question too, at least with a process to try to build some regional consensus about what we need most. Ben Stupka has been managing planning and financial forecasts and system updates and pilot projects and so much more at the RTA since it started. They finally put him in charge. Ben,
we'll see. Yeah.
Again, recognizing that you've got way more going on than you can possibly summarize here. Can you give us some thoughts on the state of transit and where do we go from here? What's coming up next?
Sure. Let me, I'm going to just in the interest of time and the fact that we just presented a lot of information. Can everyone see my screen? Yes? Good, cool. I'm just gonna jump right to it. Let's see here. Get this to work. There we go. So I think folks are generally aware, but the RTA's role here in the region is to coordinate with all of our providers. So DDOT, SMART, AAATA, the People Mover, M1 Rail. We also work closely with MDOT, both their kind of the road side of their house and the transit side of their house and their Office of Future Mobility. We work with other small mobility providers throughout the region like MOGO and other providers like that. We're tasked with developing a master transit plan. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today. Administering regional programs and distributing resources. So that's all the formula funding that comes in the region, state and federal formula funding. You know, if we end up pursuing any federal funding, so all the questions the gentlemen were talking about earlier in terms of federal funding, that would be something that the plan we're talking about and kind of the RTA here is here to help strategically kind of get us in place for that funding. The operators have been, you know, doing a great job during an unbelievable and unprecedented time. You know, we always want to make the distinction from the RTA's perspective. We kind of do planning and strategy and coordination. They're on the front lines operating, you know, and we're here to support them and work with them. And the more that we can do that, the better. So you'll see a lot of the planning process I put forward, a lot of discussions I've had with Mikel and with Robert and others. It's all about us working together and promoting what they're doing and finding avenues to really, you know, advance what it is they're doing. I won't spend a lot of time on this. These are just a listing of things that the RTA has done over the last year, including a focus plan for seniors and people with disabilities. We're working on a new paratransit booking app. Probably our hardest luck story from the pandemic is the D2A2 Express bus pilot. So for those watching regional transit for a long time, getting an actual transit connection between Ann Arbor and Detroit has been on the #1 to-do list for, from a regional perspective for a long time. We launched this service March 13th, the same day everything shut down, after probably a year and a half, 2 years of, scraping, clawing, getting funding together, getting contracts together, just getting it all set up. We had logos, we had marketing campaign, we had the thing launched, and we had to shut it down after about 2 weeks. And we've just been kind of waiting for when's the right time to start it again. I want folks, I say this every time, the funding is secure, the contract is secure. We just have to find the right time to launch it again. So you will see D2A2 Express as soon as the public health indicators and some of the market starts coming back. We just have to wait for that, but we're ready to go with the funding. We talked a little bit about CRISA. So this is the new CARES Act. I don't even remember what the acronym stands for at this point, but I just want to give folks a sense of scale. So CARES was about $154 million between Ann Arbor and Detroit. CRISA is a little more than half of that. So the RTA is working with the providers to divvy up these funds right now. That'll be an action we're taking in the next month or so. And then we have our eyes on Washington on another potential stimulus coming down the pike. So we'll see how that plays out. But what I really want to talk about is the regional plan. So I'm just going to breeze through, where were we and where are we going? Most of you will remember the 2016 Regional Master Transit Plan, which was approved August of 2016. It was overall a $4.7 billion investment. It was a 1.2 mil property tax ask. Had bus rapid transit corridors, commuter rail, a brand new commuter express service, airport express service throughout the entire region. Provided additional investment for paratransit throughout the region. Made it all the way to the ballot in 2016 and lost by 1%. Done. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Here we go. All right. So we tried again. 2018, we put together the Connect Southeast Michigan plan. This one was a $5.4 billion investment, 1.5 mils. Couple of key changes. Had more frequency on more routes, kind of peeled back the level of BRT improvements. So where we had very, very large capital improvements on a few corridors, this plan had smaller, still significant, but smaller improvements on many more corridors. Really leaned a lot more heavily into having flexible programs for rural and low density areas, and having some dedicated funding for technology upgrades, being on the front lines of things like what Mikel was talking about, electrified buses, connected autonomous vehicles. How do we invest in that? How do we make sure we're investing in transit of the future? The politics in 2018 are much different than they are now. So this did not even get approved by our board. So it's still a good milestone to show the evolution of thinking and planning in transit, but didn't get approved even by our board. So that is what it is. Our new master plan approach. So we're taking all the great things you heard tonight from Mikel and Smart, taking the lessons learned from COVID and the lessons we've learned, before that, organizing it into a document that's very provider forward, provider focused, identifying a base vision, goals, and strategies. What can we build on? How do we collectively have a regional transit, goals that we're shooting towards? Developing potential network and initiative recommendations based on community conversations, really starting to talk a lot more about trade-offs. What are some of the key decisions we have to make? We can't have everything. We do have some constraint that we have to live within. But what kind of system can we design together with the community, with the providers? What kind of recommendations can we put out there? Creates a universe of projects and programs that can be prioritized with local, state, or federal. So this gets to the questions that folks were asking before. This is the place where we can put in what are the things that we want to do? So when we get the knocks on the door, no matter what color of money it is, we can say, hey, we have a regional planning document that says these are our priorities. These are the things we want to do. We have a good sense of how we want to achieve them. Let's start tackling the list together. The other thing we want to do is make it a very simple document, very short. Try not to get overly technical, and something that we create as a living document that we're updating on an annual basis. So that's the other piece of this. We really want to make it an ongoing process, so we're always making it as fresh as possible. So we started this in late 2020 by developing a vision, goals, and strategies. We are at the final stages of putting together what I call a briefing book, which is just a 10 to 15 page kind of where are we now, what are our goals and strategies and visions, just kind of putting it all together in one place. That'll be the basis of our engagement program, which will start in probably actually March. We'll start rolling out in March, but really in earnest April through August. Obviously, it's hard to do public engagement at this point. Who knows what it's going to look like in the future, even in the next 6 months. But we are committed to having as many tools available as possible, to try and give people as many different ways to engage with the process that we can. I do hope that we will be able to have some public meetings and really be able to get out there and interact a little bit more. That will lead to a master plan in September, and then you'll see this break and then this term expenditure plan. So this is one of the key things that's different about this time other than the other times. The other plans were constrained to a specific dollar amount. They were tight as a drum. I couldn't add one extra bus anywhere in that plan, in any of those plans. This is all about developing a plan that has community consensus, that's broader, that has a lot more of what we want to see in it. Helps us address some of those key questions. And then when a funding source and strategy is selected, so getting back to even what Executive Coulter was talking about, when we kind of figure out, okay, this is the approach, we can take the master plan and say, these are the things we're going to prioritize, and we're going to create an expenditure plan that's constrained, and that is what is going to go to the voters. So the master plan can be kind of this perpetual process that we're doing. That's a little bit lighter, a little bit easier, where we're collecting information. And then when we really want to make that push to go to the ballot, that's where we switch to the expenditure plan. So it'll be something we look at every time we have an opportunity to go to the ballot and say, are we gonna do that this time, or are we gonna take a step back and wait for another opportunity? That does not mean that we won't be aggressively pursuing strategic federal and state grants to advance programs and projects. This is just about the local funding opportunities and ballot initiative. And I would just say, in case I forget, per RTA legislation, the next opportunity we do have to go to the ballot is November of 2022. So for folks who for what we have to deal with in terms of our rules and our legislation, we have to go on November ballots in even years. So that's, always part of our consideration and timing that we have to follow. So the region transit vision, we envision a region with sufficient and secure funding to support improved public transportation options that will advance equity by increasing accessibility, satisfy the integrated mobility needs of communities that make up Southeast Michigan, and promote livable, healthy, and sustainable growth. So that's the vision. We have the following goals. I won't read them all, verbatim, but expand transit to new places, enhance existing services, develop innovative and adaptable solutions, secure long-term dedicated transit route revenue, and build sustainable partnerships. And then we have a series of strategies. So all this is going to be in the briefing book, but I do want to point out a couple of things that Mikel and Robert both identified. Developing the region's transit workforce, absolutely. And this is one of the things I don't think our earlier plans really addressed accurately and actually put some potential investment towards from a planning perspective. That is a huge part of it. Reducing the environmental impact of the transit system was not something we ever really named as a strategy before. It was kind of in there, but it wasn't really named as a strategy. Certainly supporting provider funding initiatives, and this includes, SMART's need to go on an ongoing basis to get its millage renewed. And how do we kind of play that balance? I wanted to give just a quick example. So just a sample kind of strategy. So each one of these strategies is going to have a why it's important. That'll have a data indicator along with it. So we'll get a sense of, when we say jobs aren't, the transit system isn't getting people to jobs, or there's, whatever. We've identified 41.9% of the jobs in the region and just about 67% of the points of interest, which we defined as hospitals and secondary education institutions, can be reached from existing transit. So that means 60%, almost 60% of jobs cannot. So we want to start putting those numbers to it. So we know, okay, where are we at? Where do we want to try and go? The engagement phases. So while we're still kind of putting this together, I did want to just give people an idea of what you're going to see kind of early, middle, and end of the engagement. So the first place will be reestablishing priorities. Some of the work that True has already done, DDOT and SMART are doing consistent planning exercises, surveying. So just making sure we understand what are people's priorities. Are they reflected in our goals and strategies, adjusting the goals and strategies if we need to. Then really getting a discussion of trade-offs. So I just threw kind of a graphic in here, and it'll be much more robust than just this question, but how do you balance a big wide system that serves a lot of people versus a system that's very ridership focused and focused on corridors? And it's not one or the other, right? It's something in between. But we've never really had a robust discussion about how do we balance trade-offs? What does the community want to see, and what does it prioritize, and how is that reflected in our plan? And then phase 3, obviously, is the draft plan itself. So with that, the RTA website, rtamichigan.org, all this information will be there. All of the planning studies and things we've done over the last year are available there. We're certainly on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. My email address is right there, so you can always just reach out to me and I can answer any questions. Always happy to walk through anything with anybody and talk about regional transit. I think the last thing I want to say, just reflecting what everybody has said tonight, so heartened to see the amount of people who are willing to take a Thursday to talk about regional transit. This is a lifetime fight. This is a career fight for all of us. I can't claim to have been in it as long as Mikel, so just saying. But I have been in my whole career.
Watch it, buddy.
Hey man,
watch it.
just wanted to keep you on your
That's a pretty low
toes.
blow.
Hey.
That's what we get. Ben had to wait to go till after we answered.
That's right. I'm salty. Yeah. So, but it's a lifelong fight. It's a boulder we're trying to kind of push up the hill, and I'm very much about having my eyes on the big prize and the big changes, but also celebrating those small improvements, the small victories, especially, with what we're dealing with now. And just, want to just emphasize the great job the providers have been doing, the amount they're communicating, the amount the RTA is communicating with the providers. We're truly all in this together, and this crisis that we're going through has really shown, transit to be the essential service it is, the immense amount of value and necessity it has in our community. So I think we really have the opportunity to keep building on that on into the future. So thank you for the time.
Excellent. Excellent. And I know we are over, but there's been so much great information, so many good questions, so many, and a few technical difficulties. So I would like just a couple more minutes of folks' time as we look to wrap up. This section was, where do we go from here? And while we're just about out of time, we still don't necessarily have a precise answer of where we go from here. We know that, then you can probably stop screen sharing. We don't really want to necessarily need to see our emails. There we go. No. Let's see. There we go. All right. I've done that myself. So we do know, we don't necessarily have all the answers for where we go from here, but we do know some of the needs and some of the opportunities that are coming up in future months. We know that ensuring that our region is ready to maximize federal transit support. Whatever dollars are able to come in, make sure we're ready to utilize those to the greatest extent. There's also going to be a need to work with city, county, and state leaders to tackle the transportation side of climate change, which, while there's a lot of recognition of the value of climate, need to address climate change, transit is often left out. There may be opportunities to help DDOT figure out how to better compensate those drivers, or other ways to ensure that they can run enough buses to eliminate some of that crowding, and stop having to pass riders up, which I know they don't want to do. There may be needs to rebuild confidence in public safety. Will we be able to convince more communities to join SMART? There's a lot of potential in the next few months, and we don't have all the answers, but that's okay. Even all the great brains on this panel and in this audience, it'll take even more teamwork to develop those answers and bring them to fruition. One of the things we're doing at TRUE, we're undertaking a survey of dozens of different stakeholders to help us answer that question of what's next. We're interviewing dozens of transit decision makers, allied groups, community leaders, and others. If you're a TRUE member, you should have gotten a survey asking your input, so please do share that input. We're also hearing a lot of interest in launching a new coalition of transit supporters to work together on this critical issue. We just need to figure out how to raise some funds to bring it together and to manage it effectively. We at TRUE will certainly be working closely with Ben and his team over the coming months to figure out how to bring the region together around this conversation. So what do we know? Let me close with 5 takeaways that have come to mind to me. 1, we know Metro Detroit bus service is a critical lifeline, not only for people who ride, but for all of us who depend on the people who depend on transit. We know our bus agencies are facing a lot of challenges like underfunding and COVID-19, but they are dedicated to providing great service, and they need all the support they can get. Another challenge, too many people struggle too hard to get to jobs and appointments. And too many people are putting way too much money into maintaining old junker cars because they don't feel confident in the transit system. That's a waste of money that hurts families, communities, and our whole region. It's got to stop. Leaders at the federal, state, county, and local levels recognize that climate change is barreling down on us, and it's a crisis that can't be resolved while people keep driving further and further. Electric and autonomous vehicles are part, but will not be enough. 4th, transit has a lot of supporters. As Ben was noting, in 2016, 250 different leaders and organizations and 894,000 people voted to raise their own taxes to fund better transit. And support has only grown with leaders like County Executive Coulter and President Biden. If we can bring that support together, we can make a huge difference. TRUE's been at this for 20 years, and with your dedicated transit advocate through every opportunity, every crisis, and with your continued support from our amazing members, and I hope that includes everyone watching tonight as that membership, with your support, we can continue fighting at TRUE until everyone can get where they need to go, regardless of whether they drive. Thanks again to our wonderful speakers, Dave Coulter, who was on earlier, Robert Cramer, Mikel Oglesby, Ben Stupka. Thank you so much. And please, everyone, continue to follow TRUE on our website and on our social media to ensure that you can be involved in these ongoing conversations about planning and advocacy into the coming year. Thanks so much and have a great night.
Thank you.